All right. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our presentation for this evening. So tonight, like I said, we're really going to look at how students can set goals effectively to help them on the path to success, both in their academic careers in high school, and then also looking forward into college and their employment in the future. So like I said, again, my name is Kim Rouse. I am the communications assistant and one of the coaches here. I went to the University of Rochester in Western New York, where I studied music, technology, and society. Before that, I was an A Better Chance Scholar. I went to the Baldwin School in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, where I was a National Merit Society finalist. At the U of R, I worked in the admissions office, both as a tour guide and as one of the assistants, counseling students through the process and helping them find their place, even if it meant they didn't go to my alma mater. I came on board to College Thoughts in 2019 as a part-time coach and decided I loved it enough to come on full-time in 2021 in the height of the pandemic. And I truly love what I do. So if at any point you have any questions, you can always feel free to put them in the Q&A at the bottom there, and I will be saving time at the end for questions as well. All right, so looking into it first, why should students set goals for themselves? What is the point of doing that? Well, kind of breaking it down into a few statistics. So first, when we think about it, current research shows only 20% of people actually set goals for themselves. And then of that 20, only 14 actually write them down. And then of that 14, a tiny 6% actually go on to achieve their goals, which is very interesting because what we have found is that just by taking the time to set those goals, students are actually 10 times more likely to succeed in their lives just by taking the time to both brainstorm and write them down. And we tell students this. We tell them that it's important for a few different reasons. The first being that it gives students a sense of control. A lot of times it can feel like you're just kind of on a roller coaster here, right? Life is happening, you're in the midst of it, but you don't really have a whole lot of control over what happens. But setting goals allows students to say, I am choosing to do this. I am choosing to excel at this. I'm choosing to achieve this thing. That gives them that sense of agency. Additionally, it helps students focus, right? If they know that I'm going to achieve this grade by the end of this semester, I'm going to get this grade on this midterm, it helps them focus their efforts so that they are more able to actually do it. They are able to create that plan so that the steps that they need to take will be done, and they'll make sure that they actually achieve their goals. It also helps to motivate students. There is no better feeling than being able to say, I accomplished what I set out to do. And that is true for students as well. There is no feeling like being able to say, I have achieved this. I worked hard for this thing. And it motivates them to want to keep trying, to really keep pushing, even when things start to feel tiring and when things start to get kind of daunting. Next up is accountability. This system of creating goals gives them something to be accountable to. If they're just kind of going through things, oh, I missed it. I didn't get a B on that test, but it'll be fine. Whereas instead of they know they're shooting for an A, getting that B is a wake-up call, saying, hey, I set out to do this. I didn't quite make it, but I am accountable for this because I have chosen to set this goal for myself. And lastly, it gives students a sense of autonomy. We want students to be able to stand on their own 2 feet so that when we send them out into the world for college and beyond, they know how to self-regulate, they know how to make sure they are on track for their goals. And starting it early, starting it in high school, teaches them how to do that. It helps them develop those skills and learn to rely on themselves. And it helps them develop that inherent, that intrinsic motivation, as opposed for waiting for someone, maybe a parent or a teacher or a coach like myself, to come along and say, hey, you should be doing this. Hey, have you done your homework? Hey, did you turn this in? Instead, it shifts that agency onto the students so that they are the ones keeping track of these things. And that's something we want to make sure students are able to do and confident with by the time they leave our services. So now we know why it's important, but we also want to know how to do this effectively, right? You can say that you want to achieve anything, but we want to make sure that we give students the tools to create their goals and also stick to them. So the first thing that we tell them is to set SMART goals, and SMART is an acronym. We're going to break down what each letter represents and how students can really put that into practice in their lives. First is to be specific. These goals need to be clear and well-defined. What I've had a lot of students say to me is that, well, my goal for this semester is to get better grades. And that's really confusing, because what does that mean? What does getting better grades actually mean? What is it that you are aiming to really accomplish here? That is a bit too vague, because even if it's just a 1-point difference, well, that's technically better. But is that what you were going for? Instead, we want to think of it as, I'm going to get a B in this class, an A in this class, an A in this one, and I'm aiming for at least a B+. That is specific. That is a student saying, I know what I want to do, and these are the clear metrics that I'm going to use to achieve them. When you're setting goals, they need to be clear so that there's something you can really aspire to. I know that that's something I've had to work on in my own life. Came into the new year with a resolution that I was going to be better about my finances. But what does that really mean, right? There needs to be something clear-cut and very specific to work towards. The second is that this needs to be a measurable goal. So back to our original example of getting better grades. What is the metric for that, right? If you're just saying, I want better grades, well, is that 1 point enough? Was the 1 point all you were aiming for? Or is there a set metric that we can measure up to that says, okay, I have made it. Okay, this is exactly what I was hoping for. Or, okay, I'm a little off track, but here's what I can do to course correct. So as you're setting goals, you want to make sure that this is something we can really track to make sure that we have done it. An example of that would be, okay, I am aiming. My goal is that I will get a 95 on the midterm. That is measurable. We can clearly tell whether or not we have achieved that goal. And that is a way to make sure, one, is specific, and two, it is measurable, so students can really stay accountable to that goal. Next is that we want attainable goals. I have seen students say that they are aiming for an A or A+ in math, knowing full well math is not their strong suit. There's never anything wrong with aiming high, but the trouble comes when we aim too high. You want to challenge yourself, but you don't want to set a goal that is impossible for you to attain. If you know that this particular subject is a real struggle for you, then shooting for an A could feel like something you're never going to accomplish, and it's therefore demoralizing. You want to keep in mind how you usually are with certain subjects. If you know English is your absolute best subject, shooting for an A is going to be a challenge, but it's a challenge that is likely attainable. If you know math is the absolute bane of your existence, and that you struggle consistently with math, then shooting for an A could be aiming too high. That could be setting yourself up for failure, and that's never something we want students to see. So instead, you want to sit back and really think, what is a challenge for me, but still going to be attainable? For my students, I usually tell them to think about your average grades in that class from last year. If at the end of the year, you were averaging a B-, was that the absolute best that you could do? If the answer to that question is no, then we need to think about, well, how about if we shoot for a B by the middle of this semester? Why don't we shoot for a B to see, how did we do? How do we feel? Is this attainable? Is this something we can actually accomplish? We want these goals to be relevant. And these goals, especially in the realm of school, are usually going to be with grades, things extracurricular, maybe it's meeting with teachers, but we want them to pertain to whatever students are working on at that time. We want them to pertain to what students are aiming for long term. For those juniors and seniors, a goal I really like to have students think about our SAT or ACT scores, because that is something that is relevant, it is specific, it is measurable, and it is attainable. And it does pertain to what they want going forward. If college is something you want to do, then there are set goals that we have to achieve in order for you to be a competitive applicant. So these goals, as you're thinking about them, as you're brainstorming, what could I possibly choose? What could I possibly want to use as my goal? Make sure that they make sense for your trajectory. That's not to say that you can't have goals that maybe pertain to your personal life as well. One of my goals is to make sure that every week I set aside an amount of time to just tidy up. Things get busy during the week. You don't put things away all the time. So I have a goal to tidy up. It's not necessarily aligned with my career goals, but it is still one worth having. But when you think about these goals, you want to make sure that most of them are relevant to what you are aiming to accomplish. And last but certainly not least, time bound. We don't want these goals to be open-ended such that they could just go on forever. Because how are you going to evaluate whether or not you've actually achieved it? How will you ever really know what you have accomplished if we didn't give ourselves a deadline to achieve it? Now, that being said, these deadlines can come in increments. If your goal is at the end of the school year to have an A in a class, well, we might want to have some earlier deadlines to make sure that we are on track. But you want to make sure that there is some point in time that you have set aside as a deadline or moment to just reflect and review on how it's going so far. So you can see, do I need to reevaluate this goal? Is this goal still going to be attainable? Or do I need to rethink it? Do I need to edit this goal to something that is going to be more attainable, to something that I can actually potentially achieve? It's important to make sure that you add some sort of time limit to this, because if we just keep this going forever, how will you truly know if we have accomplished this? If we never have an end date in sight, there's no way to measure whether or not we have accomplished the thing that we set out to do. Secondly, write it down. I cannot tell you the number of students I have had that have sat with me in a session, and we have spent time talking through goals, talking through goalposts, making sure we set it up, just for them to not write anything down. And it seems so confusing to me. Why not write it down? It's worth it. And what we have found through research is that 42% of people are 42% more likely to succeed at your goal just because you wrote it down. And when I say that, I don't mean on a piece of scratch paper that you might lose, that might go in the trash. No, you want to write it somewhere important, somewhere that you're going to see it consistently and be reminded, this is a goal of mine, or these are my goals. These are the things that I am trying to accomplish. Sometimes sticky notes are the way to go. I've had a few students who like to just write it on a sticky note, tape it to their computer, and every time they open their laptop, there it is. Perfect. It's a visual reminder every time they sit down to do work that these are the things I am trying to accomplish. These are the things I am aiming for. And therefore, I am going to do it because I haven't forgotten. You also want to use positive language to continuously motivate yourself. And it's very subtle. As opposed to saying, I want to have fewer B's on my application, on my transcript. Instead, say, I want to achieve an A in this class and an A in this class. Just shifting that language puts it in a more positive light. Saying things like, I want to get fewer B's, makes it feel like you failed in some way. It's a very subtle language programming. And instead, we want students to be excited about their goals. So you want to make sure as you're writing them down to use consistently positive language to pump yourself up, make yourself feel better, make yourself really likely and motivated to see this through to the end. And lastly, make an action plan. All right. If your goal is to get, let's say, a 3.5 GPA at the end of the year, what are the steps that you need to take to get there? Just writing, I will get a 3.5 GPA isn't quite enough. Because do you know how you're going to do that? Do you know what the steps are to actually achieve that goal? you want to actually write down the plan, write down the steps. If you want to make a checklist, I am a big fan. Checklists are a great way to make sure that all of those things are accounted for. For some students, you can talk through it step by step. Okay, if you're going to get a 3.5 GPA, what's the first thing you have to do? Well, I have to do all of my homework. That is absolutely correct. Well, what's next? Well, shouldn't I talk to the teacher? Yes, you should absolutely talk to your teacher. Let's put that as a step on this list as well. Well, what's next? Well, I should go to study hall. Great plan. Actually write down each bullet point for each goal that you have for how you're going to accomplish it. And you're much more likely to see it through to the end. Just writing down a blanket goal isn't quite enough, because if you get off track, do you know how to course correct? If you lose your way for a little bit, and that's probably going to happen, and that's okay. But if we didn't write a plan, how are we going to find our way back to where we needed to be? So as important as it is to just write down the goal, it is even more imperative to write down the steps to accomplish that goal. All right. And lastly, share your goals. For each of my students, we do this at the beginning of every school year and at the beginning of the next semester if they're on a semester-based system. And I will have all of my students write down their goals. And as soon as we have finalized that, I also have them share it with their parents. Because there is something to be said for having that outside accountability. The school year is long, and it's tiring after a while. But having someone else to just sit with you and make sure that you stay on track is significantly more helpful than trying to go it alone. So tell your friends and family, tell the people that are in your court, that are by your side, hey, these are the things that I am aiming to accomplish, to make sure that they also know. And so if there's a way that they can help you, they're there to prop you up, to set you up for success. And to secondly, lean on them. No one gets through this alone. No one truly does anything alone. So if at any point you find yourself slightly off the path or slightly wavering on whether or not you want to actually see this through, lean on those people that are on your side, because they'll help you through this. They'll make sure that you make it to the end. They'll help motivate you to get back on track. And what we found is that you are 64% more likely to accomplish your goals just by telling other people, just by letting them be that support system for you so that you don't have to try and shoulder this alone. They're also likely to have extra resources that can help you. So why sit there and try and muscle your way through when you could tell other people and let them share that burden with you? Let them help you so that you can succeed. At the end of the day, that's really all any of us want. That's all any of us want for students. We want you to be successful. We want you to achieve your goals. So share them with other people. That way, when you start to get tired, they can remind you why you decided to do this. They can remind you of the purpose of doing this. So I wanted to stop there for now to make sure I leave time for questions. On the screen here are all of our social media channels, and right there you'll have a QR code for our closing survey. It only takes a couple of minutes, so if you have a moment, we would certainly love for you to fill that out, just so we can learn a little bit more about what you liked about this particular presentation, or if there are other things that you would love to hear us do a presentation on, we'd certainly love to hear that as well. But for now, I'll go ahead and stop to leave some time for questions. And of course, there is my contact information right there. So if you would like to just send me an email with your questions, you are more than welcome to do so. But I'll be right here for the rest of the time. So that if you do have any, feel free to go ahead and put them in the Q&A.